So I don't know if it'll be useful for me to record this, but I'll do it out of habit. Today, obviously, makeup class. I have a few notes in case no one had any particular questions or anything like that that I could, of things that I could talk about. But as I mentioned over the past couple of classes, I do want to prioritize whatever concerns you may have about what we've talked about, or anything that you want specificity on, or clarification, or even just a quick and dirty review on if something was unclear or a little bit, far in our memory. Even though we've only spent 3 weeks together, sometimes 3 weeks can be a long time, right, for remembering things. So yeah, we'll kind of take whatever time we need to for this. If it takes, the full 2 hours and whatever minutes, full 3 hours, great. I don't mind. If it takes a little bit less than that, so be it. Okay. I even went through the effort of putting all of the former PowerPoints on my USB key in case we need to reference anything or things like that. So happy to go to any class. And I even put a copy of the exam on this, blacked out, of course, for some. I'm not going to show you the exam. But to give you a sense of what the format is like, just if you want, some people, I've had that in the past, some people wanted like a visual component to that, but I'm happy to show you any of this. And I even have variations on the questions that I'm going to be asking. Not every single question, but just to give you a sense of what the questions look like. Okay? So yeah, we can kind of go in whatever directions, whatever direction we want. So I'll launch it over to you. Does anyone have a particular question or a place they want to begin with?
Is there anything in particular that you would recommend that we reread?
Everything.
Every single thing. You can start with going over just the exam. What's on it, so then we can maybe narrow our questions down to what we're not.
Sure.
Like the highest percentage of what
we're not. What do you mean the highest percentage of what?
Like, if it was like the words, does it make up like 50% of the exam? Like,
oh, okay. No. So the way that I organized the exam, as you can see, so I have 5 short answer questions, okay, 3 points each. I gave 10 lines. You don't have to fill in every line or anything like that, right? Answer the question as best as you can. Okay. If you manage to do it in 2.5 lines and you give me an actually solid answer, I'll give you your points.
Okay. Do you care if it's single space or double space?
No, as long as I can read your answer appropriately. Okay. I'll come back to your question about about which text in particular in a second. But I tried to take from a little. There's not necessarily a specific question about every single text, but especially for the long answers that we'll get to later, you will be able to use almost any text in the class to form your answers. Okay. So the short form questions are about specific works. Okay. Usually it's about something that we've discussed in class or that you can elaborate upon based off of what we've discussed in class. Okay. So Ube, you were mentioning the wars, and then I saw your hand move. For example, there is a question about the wars in the short form questions. Okay. So you can probably go over your notes on the wars or just whatever you remember from that class. And you can probably infer some kind of short form question from that. Okay. For these short ones, I didn't talk about anything that we wouldn't have talked about in class. Okay. Either thematically, yeah, most of these are thematic in nature, actually. I don't remember them being plot related. Hold on. I'll pull up the actual exam on my computer just so I can remember. Yeah, so the short questions, they will relate to specific things that we've talked about in class that are thematic or somewhat related to how a work is constructed, right? I'm not going to ask you like what happens on page 5 of Angélique, for example. That would be an insane thing for me to ask. Okay? It's not a memory thing, it's a comprehension thing. Yes, you had your hand up.
Would you prefer we like draw on material we didn't write our papers on already? Or if that's okay?
No, it's fine.
Okay,
But especially for the short form answers, you're going to have to answer about the specific work. So there's inevitably going to be some overlap on that one. So that's fine. For your own intellectual benefit, you might want to do that for the long form answer, but I'm not going to remove points if you do. It's okay to return to previously established ideas. People do it all the time. So yeah, 3 points each on each of these. If you're someone who's really verbose or who writes big, I even have I even ordered some little like booklets from the university. So if you want to add on, right, you can keep going in the actual booklet. Okay, so you don't need to worry about space. Then, like I said, there is a passage identification section. 10 points. Okay. Yeah, mostly I did this so I can alleviate some of it. It really shouldn't be too hard. Okay. 1 point for identifying the correct author and 1 point for identifying the correct title of the work.
even if we spell something wrong.
I have to be able to understand it. Okay.
What if like the first two letters, the last two letters are almost the same?
If I can understand it, it's fine. Okay. And even we've talked about some works that have long titles in them. Okay. If I can clearly identify which work you're talking about, you'll get your point. Okay. So if there were a passage on discourse on the logic of language and you kind of run out of space, there's no other work that we talked about in the class that would be discourse on the, right? So I'll assume that's the one you're talking about. I hesitated for a sec on adding a couple of like bonus lines for this one so that you explain, maybe give me an explanation as to why this line matters in the overall text. And then I decided to remove it in order to give you more time to work on the development question if it so pleases you. I see Annalie. Yes. Right. So this should be probably the easiest part of the exam. Okay. Maybe not. I don't know. I see some of your faces. Maybe it's not the easiest part of the exam.
So all we have to do there is the author title.
Yeah. So read the excerpt, and you say, "Okay, that is from this person, this text." Okay. It's my cheeky way of making sure that you've done the readings.
What if we tell you it's from class or week 1, day 1?
No, that I won't accept because usually we talk about more than one work in the class. And then there's the development question. I gave 15 points. I might give more for it. It depends. So I'll provide you 4 question options. You can select any one of them. Okay. But you have to write about one. Okay? No mixing and matching the questions, nothing of that. Okay? One essay style question. The questions, because you won't have access to your books, of course, during the exam, mostly because I don't want to have to deal with the headache of some people having digital copies and some people having physical copies and et cetera and so forth, right? I'm not going to, like I said here, expect you to quote directly, if you do have a direct quote off the top of your head, man, good for you, right? That's probably deserving of an automatic 2 or 3 points right there. Okay. But yeah, paraphrasing or at least referencing an event in some way, shape, or form that's comprehensible will probably do some pretty good work here. But of course, it's very difficult to write an essay in this style. So the way that I formulated the questions, again, would have been in a way that either is about a specific work, but is a broad enough topic that you can take it in whatever direction you feel comfortable with, or the question is about a specific thematic or formalistic component that we've talked about in class and that you can apply to various works, right? Whichever one you prefer. Does that make sense so far? Okay. So for example, this is not an actual question, but it's a variation on one of them. I could say something like, compare the use of, just because we talked about it this week, compare the use of photographs in Obasan and Billy the Kid, right? And their effect on the actual narrative. Okay? I'm not asking you to talk about specific components of the photography or even other elements of the text specifically, but if you want to bring in those elements or if they supplement your argument in any way, shape, or form, all of that can come into play, right? Whatever at the end of the day helps you make your point. Okay? So again, I'm rather flexible on how you approach these questions. My goal here is that you can actually demonstrate that you've understood these texts and that you've thought about them in, an intelligent way. So far, so good? Okay. Because this question is obviously the biggest as far as space, right? You have 2 pages that I'm providing, but you can go on into the booklets if you want. And also just the questions are broad and it's worth the most points and etc. What I recommend, and I will remind people of this next week, is that you start with the development question, right? You decide which one you want to write on. You think about it, maybe go to the other questions for a little bit, and then formally write your short essay. Okay? You'll have 3 hours to write this exam. In my opinion, it's longer than you'll actually need to write this exam, but also, because you have 3 hours, take the time that you need. Okay? Any questions on any of this?
Is the exam still in this classroom?
Yes. Still in this classroom, and I don't know, did you all see the email from the university today? So they're shutting down the university starting next week. Hold on, I can pull the email up. This is why you should read your emails.
When I see the ones from anybody but a teacher, I just delete
They send you so many. They send us emails a day. Yeah,
I mean, at least they're not deleting yours, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But yeah, you should still be able to access it because I specifically told security that we have an exam, right? But starting June 22nd until August, the school's going to be on a kind of summertime lockdown where there's going to be increased security and the doors are not going to be automatically unlocked everywhere as they are until 4:15 at this stage.
But
right?
really, it's just the same. We just need our key cards.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's in the list of publicly accessible spaces, Clark Hall is not one of them. So that's why I told security, you need to.
They individually lock classroom doors sometimes after hours.
Yeah. Thankfully, I have a key to this class. So I'll be able to at least open that. But yeah, please bring your key fob. Yeah, it should work. As far as I know, your key card should work. But it has happened that it doesn't work in certain spaces. So yeah, yes.
Do you require our student ID cards to be here for the exam? Do you know us?
I know you enough, and I'm going to ask you to write your name on it. Yeah, that's fine.
Teachers go, I don't have students. I'm using my sisters.
No, I never ask. I never ask students for their ID.
Okay.
I would maybe we were a big enough class, but I think I know your names all pretty well by now.
One person didn't show up for the exam.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Do we have someone like that?
We have there's one person that didn't show up the entire semester, but she's been following online. But that was for personal reasons that she couldn't be in physically here. But there are people who haven't shown up to class ever.
Really?
Oh yeah.
And they didn't withdraw.
Hmm?
They didn't withdraw.
Too bad for them.
Yeah.
What if they shove on the exam?
I think I'm actually allowed to deny them entry at that point. Yeah.
Well, haven't they been
Even if they did the exam, even if they nailed it, they would pass because it's worth 40%, and so it would be worthless.
But haven't they been entering everything assignments?
Oh, then they're like,
He's like, no.
Like, a lot.
I think there was a movie where that happened. It was like a summer school movie. The guy goes to the bathroom first day, never comes back. Gets 99% on the final exam, boosts everyone's grade up.
So yeah, just make sure to bring your key cards in case it's not unlocked and all of that, because I don't want to have to deal with going downstairs just to unlock someone's door and so on and so forth. I'm going to be arriving a little bit earlier on that day just to make sure that I can actually access the building and all of that jazz. And also because we have a student who's doing it at the student services, so I'm gonna make sure. But yeah, all of that is gonna be arranged ahead of time. Yeah. Any other questions about the exam? Does anyone have concerns? Is it pretty much what you expected?
So there's not going to be like a text for us to analyze on the exam. It's all like stuff that we have retained.
That's what I was saying too. I worry about that because I like to refer back to when I'm writing a longer piece.
Okay. So in some of the essay options, there will be some references to the text, to one of the texts. Okay. And you can inspire yourself from that or reference based off of that. But no, there's not going to be a specific block of text that you can use. Now, here's a question that I have for you. And it relates to what you were saying about using and referring to specific blocks of text. I was talking to some other teachers in the department that I crossed paths with and had coffee with. And they were saying that sometimes they let students in their English classes have a note sheet. Sorry, that was inappropriate. Sorry. I just had supper. So students have a note sheet where they can write things like themes or quotes that they think are going to be important or that they can, refer to if they want to. But for this class, I think it would be max one sheet, front and back type of thing. Nothing too major. Is that something that would be of interest to you or helpful? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but are you gonna get mad if you write down every single book name and author? That's what I was.
Yeah, you're gonna.
Because
That's true. That doesn't work on the passage.
unless you want to check them, but I'm sorry.
No, that's true. I didn't. I was thinking of it more for the development questions and less of the passage identification. That's true. I could check. Actually, it wouldn't be that long. I could check.
Check each of our notes to make sure that we didn't write down any titles and authors.
Or you could just make this part not that challenging.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that challenging.
I think it was fine.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially since it's just that one question. I mean,
And you're giving us
Yeah.
4 options.
as if you're explaining it the way that it sounds like it, it's more what you're taking out of the question, and you want to hear what we think of the question, not what we think the book is.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
I was offering you the possibility because other teachers have mentioned it, but yeah, I don't think it would be that necessary. Does it hinder your ability to quote directly? Yeah, sure. But again, I'm not going to evaluate you based on that anyway. So,
Do we have a word count or like?
um, for the development question, what I'm thinking of, it should probably be a similar length. So like one of your first two essays would probably be a decent length. You were able to give pretty good arguments in a short amount of time, right? Or a short amount of word count. So you could probably aim for something similar in length. But again, if you want to go past that into something closer to the third essay, if you have time and if you have the energy to do it, more power to you. Yeah. Some of the questions in the development questions are ones that we brought up directly in class. Others are adaptations as well. So
You want this to be formatted like an essay?
focus on the development part of the essay, right? One idea, one paragraph type of thing. I don't think a formal introduction and conclusion will be super helpful in this case. Which arguably allows you to get a little bit more in depth with some of the answers if you have the chance to. So. Just to give a dry run of an example, I'm trying to adapt one in my mind here. I should have brought the books with me in class today just to be able to reference them. Okay. So if I say something like, more than one work in this class used music, right? So we can think of Angélique at the start of our semester, right? That used both contemporary music and references to the music of her home space, right? Inventory yesterday, right? We talked about that for a while.
Am I remembering correctly, or did I see something in the books?
Billy the Kid, I don't remember music playing a part in it.
Something that would do that.
It seems like it, but I don't remember that being, maybe it's like a lyric that I didn't necessarily think about, but I don't remember music. But anyway, so like more than one work, right, has used music. Okay? So I could ask a question like, right, I'm just writing it down so that you can think of it, but not even song lyrics. We can just see music. Right. I feel comfortable giving this example because it's not an actual example. But it gives you an idea of the scope that I'm dealing with.
That's huge.
It's huge, but the point is that you can play with it if you want, right? If you've read Angélique at the start of class, but you haven't had a chance to read Inventory, you'll at least be able to refer to Angélique if you want, right? And when I say consider, sometimes I specify it, right, what I mean, but we can think of things like in what way the music is actually used, right? How is it incorporated into the form? So in the case of Angélique, it is both in the text. It's incorporated into the staging, right, of the play, because Lorena Gale tells you this song plays, right? So you're meant to imagine it. It's in the dialogue, because Angelique herself refers to the music as if it's something that she can hear from the past, right? So all of these are things that you could bring up, for example. And then the second part of consider in this question could be something like, why Lorena Gale does this, right? What effect might it have? What else could you talk about? You could probably also discuss, this is an extension of why, but the specific song choices, right? That might be a little bit more difficult with Lorena Gale, because I don't remember, but personally I don't remember off the top of my head the specific references, but it might be easier with someone like Dion Brand, right? Who we talked specifically about those references. So why does she talk about Bob Dylan? Why does she use the Beatles? Why does she use Victoriana and so on?
Well, actually, you could say he has African drums in the background.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. So even if you're not referring to a specific artist, right, you can get that sense as well. So already we have 6 points that we could easily develop into a small paragraph, right, and that you can take into a full essay. To finally come back to your question, Mel, is there a particular work that we should focus on? Okay. So for the development one, there is one option that's on Angelique. It's not music, right? If you have the chance, I would reread the short poems that we've read. It shouldn't take you too long, and there's a couple of questions that relate to that throughout the actual essay. Throughout the entire exam. So yeah, short poems, Angelique. If you have notes about those various texts that we took during the class, you'd probably be okay for a lot of the questions just reviewing those notes, right? So sometimes we talked about what motivates certain authors or poetic movements and so on, right? There might be a question about such motivations, right? What drives a particular ideal or type of literature? The Wars has an option in the essay, or is part of one of the options. And it has a question that we've discussed in class in the short answers. I think that's the most I can give without telling you directly, this, that, or the other. But honestly, if you've paid attention in class, you should be pretty okay. Good. I really can't pinpoint your faces. Usually I can like tell if it's good, bad, whatever. Your faces are absolutely sphinx-like. Insane. It's giving me anxiety.
Good. That you feel the same as us.
Yeah, exactly. You really shouldn't feel anxious, right? Like, again, if you give me, for a lot of them, if you give, aside from the passage identification, if you give me an answer that holds up, I'll probably be flexible on it. Right? Yeah.
For the development, one you probably have like an approximate amount how many points you should give it for each. Like how we had like 6 up there. We think we should like make 3 certain points. It's kind of just the whole thing as a whole.
Like how? Like you mean like how is divvying up the points total?
Kind of like how like should I have 3 points describing how music affects it?
Yeah, 3 points would be a good way of putting it. I that's a good question. I forgot to include it in the description, but I'll remind you of that. Yeah, a good 3 points will probably be a good way to start. Yeah. Do we want another example or which is
What would be an example for the first questions?
The short answer.
Yeah.
There's no bonus. You didn't give us a bonus question.
Yeah, I have an idea
Yeah.
for a bonus. Like what was the best?
Memorize at home.
Yeah.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
stand up right now.
Yeah.
The best thing about
Elaborate on your
Patrick.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
on your
Praise your teacher. Yeah. The more effusive the praise, the higher the bonus points. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So like would the short answers be like how did the use of imagery in the kid help him go on to conflict?
Yeah, that could be one. Usually, the short development ones would be similar in style to the type of questions I would have asked you in class, right? Like, what effect does this particular sentence have, right, on you, or something like that? Just a short. Here, consider this for a sec.
So very narrow. Like,
Yeah, it's much more narrow. Yeah. There's one question that I had that's a little bit broader. I'm expecting a narrow answer, but you can choose different aspects of that thing to highlight. I've asked the question more than once in the first week, so you can maybe think back and you can probably guess which one it is. But yeah, just to give a quick example. What do I have? Tish. Oh, that's
are some of these PowerPoints on
some of them, yeah. I put the ones that had like extensive questions on them, but I can put all of them if you want a reminder of in some way. Okay. So I could do something like not motivator. I'm writing a very quick version of this question just to not write infinitely. Like, what was the driving factor of the Tisch poetry, for example, right? What brought them together despite them having very different styles of poetry as individual poets? That could be a short answer question. Um, I even have one on inventory. No, do I have one on inventory? I thought I did. Yes, I do. Okay, good. But it could be something like I'm giving this as an example here. So how is inventory political as a poem? Right, which was obviously something that we talked about for a length of time, right, yesterday. I'm using this as an example because there are many ways that you can answer this question. But if I put it in the short development section, I'm probably looking for one or two just quick ideas that relate to it. Right? You could probably make an entire essay out of this. That's not what I'm hoping for you to do if I put it in that section. What I'm looking for, if I have a question like this, it's political in its subject matter, right? In addressing the 20th century politics that we inherited. It's political in its very existence, for example, as someone who engages with the imagination that poetry can offer, right? To do otherwise. But after that, I'm not looking for that much of an elaboration, right? You could just say, here's this. Right? I'm going to assume that you know what I'm talking about. Good? I have to admit, I was very worried about. Hi, Khalees. I was actually pretty worried about making this exam because I was trying to mediate, right, you not being English students and the type of questions that I would usually ask or not. I don't know. Do you feel like it's long enough as far as questions are concerned? Were you expecting something longer? No.
It would be like match the text to the story.
Yeah.
And then
I was expecting 2 long essay answers.
2 long essays. Okay.
All the other questions were just an extra development question. Oh, well, please don't add another one. No, please don't. I would prefer this.
Right. I like it.
It looks great. This is an exam I can finish in 20 minutes and fuck off. Right.
I wish it was like if you put up a bit more marks. Like if you really think about it, like if you don't know like one short answer, then you're already. I think it's fast. I don't really know how you can get that higher though.
Yeah. No, I could maybe add a bonus point.
Unless each short answer is 5 marks, but then I think that's too much. So
Yeah, 5 marks would be a lot for me.
No.
Okay. No, I'll keep it as is. Maybe add a bonus point between now and Monday. Mostly to flatter my ego. So we added this. Instead of obviously asking you to reread every single text of the class, okay, which would be a foolish endeavor for me to ask of you, right? It might be practical to go over together some of the through lines or some of the topics that we discussed more broadly, right? And a lot of these topics will address more than one work in the actual class, right? And I think it'll allow you to at least think through how you can maybe connect some of the longer form questions with other works outside of the examples that I would have given in the questions, for example. Does that work for everyone? Okay, so yesterday we ended class. Do I still need this? I don't think so. At least not for now. We ended class with a reminder that history was obviously one of the major components that we've talked about in class, right? Both as a background or backdrop, whatever term you want to use. And as a theme. What's the difference between history as a background and history as a theme? And give me an example.
I'm gonna say like history as a background, backdrop, you could consider oh god, now I think I have it confused. I was say you could consider Billy the Kid. Like the Wild West background and like the history of it, you kinda have to know it to really see it. Whereas as a theme, I think you would have like the wars, where it's almost about history rather than just using it as a place setting.
Good. We all agree with this? Okay, good. You could also make the argument that Ondaatje is also playing with history as a theme, right? Because there's the historical Billy, but it's clearly not the Billy that he's talking about in his text, right? The Billy that he's presenting is entirely fictional. So yes, the backdrop of the Wild West is history as background, but Billy the character is history as theme. Just to give an extra example, the one that we talked about yesterday. Inventory also plays.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Inventory also plays with this duality. It's set against the backdrop of the 20th century, while written in the 21st century, but it's also asking you to actively consider what will the 21st century leave as its own history, right? So it's thinking very clearly about that theme, front and center. Any other examples that we want to give? I'm using this as a review for asking you to think of the texts also without your notes. So even if it seems obvious for you, use this as an opportunity to pull from the depths of your mind.
Say that the 18th century is used as a background to discuss the themes of slavery and racism.
I think almost uses both. So that's kind of
Yeah. Yeah, Angelique uses both in an interesting way. She's not necessarily playing with. Okay, hold on. Let me articulate this in a way that maybe makes sense. I almost am hesitant to bring this up right now, considering that it was so long ago. Mel is right in saying that the 18th century is the background, right, to the 20th century, late 20th century, when the play was written. And that in itself is the theme, or one of the themes, right? So it's less history as theme and more history as background as theme, if you want to think of it in that way. Again, this you don't need to go that deeply into it. This is me thinking out loud as we're thinking of it. 18th century and 20th century slavery. And the music that we brought up earlier kind of reflects that as well, right? As an image. Yeah, go
When you
ahead.
say the scraps,
The place of scraps.
the
Yeah.
place of scraps, right? Kind of uses history as a theme.
How does it use it as a theme?
When we had talked about like how like you have gaps in history and other people retelling it, might be the wrong voices retelling it, so kind of just like it's not a big history background or sorry history thing, but it's like kind of there throughout it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so he's certainly playing with that idea of like who gets to tell the story, right? Absolutely. Do you remember who he was modifying in the text? Balbo. Yeah, Matthews Balbo. So Barbeau is there in the background, right? And the fact that Barbeau was telling the story for so long about Jordan Abel's, nation and people allows him to incorporate that theme of rewriting history as a poetic form. Good. Speaking of, form was also something that we brought up a few times in class. There may be a question related to this. Not too subtly hinting at one of the possibilities of the exam. So, might as well start there. Jordan Abel plays with form. How?
Leaving blank gaps to portray like I don't want to explain that one wrong.
No, it's fine. Like the gaps in the poetry,
Yeah.
right? Gaps in the page, right? Lots of blank space, right? That are left open in order to either demonstrate all the stories that are left to be told or the gaps in the previously told story. Right? Can take it whichever way you want.
Is he I'm kind of mixing up the notes.
Yeah.
Right now. But is he the one that like placed a lot of writing in the same space and made it like kind of?
Yeah. So if you remember the terms that looked shaky, right, and superimpose, like he clearly copied a section and just pasted it one on top of each other, and it looks awful and vibraty. That's that, right? That was the place of scraps. Okay. So the vibration, yeah, vibrates the terms that are superimposed.
For form, would you like when you talk about the vibrates, could you use could I explain it as like the fonts being different, or is that kind of a crappy way to explain it?
When you say thoughts,
Well, because when you use the word superimpose, that's like a really big word, and so I would be like the fonts are shaky and overlapped.
But usually when we refer to font, it's the style of the writing itself rather than the word itself, right? So you just say, yeah, the words are superimposed.
Okay.
Yeah. Or yeah, that's my answer. Because font is just a different thing in this case. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, first.
Line.
Didn't line. Yeah.
The capitalizing S in the story.
How is that playing with form?
Because I think she uses it as a way to personify story as like another character, not just.
Interesting. I'm not against that reading at all. I just wasn't thinking of it in that way. But cool. Yeah. Okay. So either a personification of story, right? We usually tend to to capitalize, right, names of people, right? All of your names have capitals, presumably. But also there's an elevation of the very nature of stories, right? If you want to put it in a more conventional way as well, just to add on to what you were saying, she imbricates stories within stories, right? So it's not just the story of Frenchie trying to achieve a particular goal of finding his dad and the safe space, but also we're imbricating historical stories that we're telling ourselves, or coming to stories, and et cetera and so forth. So she's playing with the form in that sense. Good. Yes.
In form, would you consider Dion like the writer?
Dion Brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about her? What about her poetry plays with form?
When she included music lyrics in them.
Right. So the lyrics. Do you remember we mentioned the term yesterday? We mentioned it previously earlier in class. So what term do we use for incorporating things like song lyrics into an original poem? Yeah, found poetry. Good.
Is it still considered found poetry if the media they're drawing from is not poetry? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But you said that like in the song she did cut and piece some poems. So this is
No, so found poetry is literally finding little bits and pieces of other media, whether it's other poetry, a novel, a speech that someone gave, and incorporating it into something new. Right? If you want the like most insane version of this to the point where it's almost not enjoyable, you can look up the musical genre known as plunderphonics, right? Literally plundering sound, right? There's an artist called like 1-0-Tricks Point Never who does a lot of things like that, and it's a lot of electronic music. And what they're doing, those artists, is usually taking like 1 or 2 seconds from other songs and making like 3-minute songs out of 100 different songs that they just took like 1 or 2 seconds from. So that would be the musical version of found poetry, for example.
Or when they make the president, like all the different presidents rap a song, like have you ever seen that? They like,
No.
take like speeches, then they just
Oh yes,
like the words. Of
yeah.
the song.
Right, it would be something similar. Right.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, Trump does it.
There we go. Memes are found poetry is confirmed. Yeah.
I'm trying not to look at my notes to remember the names, but I'm
Yep.
trying. The watershed.
Watershed and Shield.
Yeah, watershed and shield.
Reminiscence.
The use of like the left margin and the right margin to create a conversation and different narrators.
Good. Who is the author of Watershed? Liz.
Liz Howard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. These are the things you need to know. Right, so Watershed.
And then like discourse.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just gonna like visualize it for people instead of writing it all down. But yeah, right, this kind of dialogue that's created between the Watershed and the Canadian Shield. It doesn't look like a conventional poem in that sense. Okay. Yeah, sorry, you were going to add something.
The discourse of language and discourse on logic and language. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good. Was the author of that one?
Philip. I
Was it
can't
Philip
pronounce her
Legacy?
name. Nuperby.
Norbese. And Norbese Philip. Yeah, good. So if you put MN Philip, if she's in there, it'll be acceptable.
Okay. So initials sometimes.
Because there's, I can clearly identify what you're talking about.
With Dion Brand work for form as well, like just because you know how she likes stats and stats and stats and stats going forever.
Yeah, absolutely. So not only in the found poetry version, we briefly mentioned this, but we didn't denote it as a point on form. But the fact that she is writing a long poem, right, that's 100 pages long, can be a rather indicative point on how she plays with form, right? Because it's not something that you would typically expect from a poem, right? At least not in a contemporary sense. We used to expect it of, I gave the Iliad and the Odyssey as examples, but even that's broken up into books.
Why does she
Um,
use long form for her poems?
Why?
Yeah. Why?
I've never actually listened to an interview where she explains her own logic behind it. But that would be an interesting thing to find out.
So that's not going to be a question.
No, it's not going to be a question. But what could be a question, maybe, is related to that. Why do these variations in form matter? Or what are the effect of some of these variations in form? Right, so if we did take the Philip one or the Howard one or whatever, what effect does that have on our actual reading practice, and why would they choose to do this?
I think like form. Do you want us to answer?
Sure, give an answer.
It like disrupts you from reading, makes you pause and think about it.
Yeah, so there's the disruption.
Drives the point.
Disruption.
Makes you consider different angles of something.
I was gonna say changes the point of view.
Mhm. POV, yeah. Good.
This is how different people.
Yeah, that's what POV is. Yeah. Point of view. Yeah. So I guess even though I don't know for Brand specifically, you can probably make an argument on the overwhelming nature of dealing with the 20th century. It is kind of reflected in that long form, right? That just doesn't stop. It hits you with all of these references and opaque imagery that you were bringing up yesterday, Brittany, of like, how do I even understand these references? And part of it would probably be, you're not supposed to. It is meant to be overwhelming in a sense, right? Yeah.
Is free verse is when it doesn't rhyme, right?
Yes,
Is that a form?
it could absolutely be a part of form. Yes.
Or is it like a really rhyme factor, or just some things not rhyme?
So before sorry, it's not just free form. It's not just free. It's not just not rhyme. Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure of. Yeah, it's still free. So are you thinking of Armstrong when we first mentioned that? Is that it, or?
I forget when we first. It was it had to have been the first week.
Yeah,
when
so
we talked about
I'm
it.
pretty sure we mentioned it with Armstrong. So free verse, when something doesn't rhyme, on its own, we can just use the term unrhymed,
Okay.
right? But free verse also refers to the fact that it doesn't respect any conventional and systemic pattern, right? Because in poetry, and we didn't really talk about this because none of our poetry really adhered to this, but one of the things that that tends to be standard in poetry is that it fits certain meter, right? Dun, 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 would be a kind of meter.
I think when we talked about it, it was like we were breaking away from the old romantic
Exactly.
ways, and this is postmodern
Yeah.
style.
Are those going to be questions about like romantic and postmodern and stuff like that?
It'll. I refer to those things in a question, but you don't have to address them specifically, right? I'm using them as context for questions.
What about split two? Would you put it in form?
There's certainly an element of form in Split Tooth. What is it?
Like the drawings and then some elements of forms in the story.
Yeah, mixes poetry, prose, imagery, same as Billy, right? Except obviously, Split Tooth takes it a step further by also adding other languages that we cannot read, right? Or most of us could not read unless we looked it up on the internet, right? Yeah.
Prose is just like it's just general conversation, right? But in writing, like that's if you were to
When you say general conversation,
like in Billy the Kid, it's more like a narrative rather than like a poem.
Okay.
I'm messing this up.
No, it's fine. So, generally speaking, we refer to prose as, I think I know what you're talking about. Longer form sentences. It can be fiction or nonfiction. Right? So, an essay is usually written in prose.
Oh, so it's not casual.
No, it doesn't have to be casual. It's longer forms of writing. Essays, novels are often written in prose. Are always written in prose by definition. Short stories usually are prose. One of the reasons that, so prose as opposed to things like poetry, right? Which is simple lines that are meant to be rhythmical, right? Rhythmical, engaging, imagistic. Right? Prose tends to be longer formed, not always emphasizing that rhythmic pattern or that musicality that poetry has. And of course, it tends to be pages and pages, generally. We don't need to worry about this for today, but then you get weird overlaps like prose poetry, which brings a little bit of both, right? And it doesn't matter for today. But yeah, prose doesn't have to be casual. It can be, but it doesn't have to. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about questions of form, history. I started erasing this. Are we all good? Okay. By the way, because of the format of today's class, feel free to, I'm not going to take a formal break at any point. Feel free to come and go as you see fit. I'm going to keep going until we're done. What other themes have we discussed?
Iconography.
Right? Icon and iconography. Good, we brought it up specifically in what context? Billy the Kid, good. So we refer to Billy as an icon.
Even the crown.
The crown, right, in True Value can absolutely be considered iconic.
Superheroes.
Yeah, we talked about superheroes, good. Don't worry, there are no questions on Batman in the exam, no matter how many times I've brought him up in the class. Although you might talk about, right, the kind of comic booky Billy the Kid, maybe, if you want.
Which Batman is the best Batman?
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be the bonus question. Which Batman is the best?
You said Robert Pattinson. So
Yeah. I know. Right, and we came to the conclusion that what was an icon? A symbol.
Person that you can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Ordinary but not.
Right. I'm paraphrasing what we spent 20 minutes on in that class, right? But something a little bit larger than itself that can, if you remember, fit in various interpretations, right? Because Billy the Kid was a bit of a hollow historical figure that we didn't know much about, it allowed Michael Ondaatje to be able to kind of imagine him however he saw fit, and it technically made sense. Okay, we did. What else? Mhm. Good. Good. So, ecology was especially big in that first week and a half of our class. We talked a lot about various ecologically minded topics, right? Such as, which of our literatures were ecologically minded or had some ecological component to it? Who was the poet of that? Fredwa. Good. Was it just Fredwa who addressed that in that group? So was Fredwa the only one who addressed ecology in that group of poets that he was a part of, if loosely? No. So what's the name of the group? Tish. Okay. Right, so Daphne Marlett, George Bowering, all of those other people that we broadly considered. Okay. What was so special about ecology for the Tish Poetry Group? Why did that matter to them? Excuse me.
Were they the ones that I'm probably on this wrong, but they're the ones that it was how nature affects them, not how they affect nature. It's how nature makes them feel.
Right. They used a specific term for that. Do we remember? It was related to the article I encouraged you to read.
Like romantic.
So they were trying to go back past the Romantics in many ways, right? So they referred to the idea of projective verse, quote unquote. But yeah, basically that was the principle of what they were talking about. You can channel nature and other voices and try to come into some kind of contact with it through poetry. Recall that Fredwa clip that I had you listen to in class, where he was just looking at a tree and contemplating what would it mean to be tree. Right? And then he wrote a poem on it. Because that's what real men do. Okay. What other... Sorry? Don't want to be in your picture. That's fine. What other ecologies or eco-lit did we address?
The oil kind of or like not. Yeah.
No, oil has nothing to do with ecology whatsoever. Yeah, so I that's why I put Tish, but yeah, absolutely. Bowering is very concerned with ecology. I gave you one version of that, but that entire collection is very concerned with ecology. Yeah. So on that week we had discussed, on that class we had discussed Howard and Abel, right? Together they're both bringing in the ecology. Right, so we talked about various Indigenous authors who each had their little spin on ecology. Sometimes it's a question of humans and non-humans. Sometimes it's a question of purely centering the ecological right? Without the human. Sometimes it's about animals. Right? We talked about that with Tanya Tagaq, for example.
I was gonna say, what about the wars?
Mm-hmm. We'll just say Findley's animals. Right? Absolutely.
He also talks a lot about how the warfare is destroying the environment, how
Yep.
it's mud and death.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure to what extent you would have been aware of that at the time, mostly because those analyses have come out in the past few years, but one of the number one contributors to climate change is military action, for example, just like the bombs or whatever that we're dropping have a huge impact. Right? So yeah, absolutely. Just the creation of this unpassable mud that's dragging people down and drowning people. So yeah, very, very ecologically minded. Even if it's not necessarily always explicit and in your face, it's certainly something that he's incorporating into his narrative. Good. And of course, the animals we all remember: the horses, coyote, the bunnies, yeah,
Dog.
the hedgehog, dog, yeah. The list goes on and on and on, right? One of the questions I'm not sure to what extent you'll be able to incorporate this into the exam proper, but just for the sake of recapitulating. If you'll recall, one of the questions that I told you animated a lot of Canadian concerns in the time of the Tisch Poetry Group was the question, where is here? What does it mean to write in, about, with, whatever we call here? Right? We never really came back to that question, but it's arguably one that pertains quite powerfully to Dion Brand, right? We were talking about borders yesterday. I wouldn't necessarily be shocked if, even if not explicitly, that question of where is here was in the back of her mind. Right? As someone who had been across the globe. Right? So we talked about it in that first week, not only in relation to something that animates a lot of Canadian writers in the Tisch Poetry Group, but something that does belie certain assumptions about Indigenous groups, right? And how Liz Howard, Jordan Abel, Jeanette Armstrong, and so on were oftentimes responding to the very notion of that question. Who are you to ask that question in such a way, right? It kind of assumes that you're the one who is the arbiter of this decision, which on some level is not necessarily to say that it's an invalid question, but it comes to this point of, should only one person be asking that question, or one group be asking that question? Maybe it's a question that we should all be asking. Right, so Brand brings this up. I'm trying to think, are there any others in the class that maybe address this? We talked a little bit about transnationality with Ondaatje. Yeah, with Billy the Kid. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's less super explicit in that text, but we can maybe add them just for the sake of argument.
in more than one way too with him because where he says from Sri Lanka, right? And then also I think we touched on like Billy the Kids, then the bilingualism that was within.
Yep. And like the fluid borders of the Wild
Yeah.
West, right? It's
Developing U.S.
yeah, exactly. It's constantly shifting westward until you literally reach the end of the West, and then what do you do with that? Right? You turn it into Billy the Kid. Right? Okay, good. I'm putting my fingers together like Mr. Burns, but there's like no evil plot happening right now. All right. There's still more. Can I erase this? So we certainly hit on major themes: the history, the ecology, the iconography, indigeneity, all these E's. Sorry, I thought someone had said something.
That was just the stomach growl.
Oh, are you hungry, perchance? Okay. So we brought this up. I brought it up as a question that isn't a question, but it's still something that you can keep in your mind. The politics of literature. Okay. Which we brought up most explicitly yesterday.
Liberalism.
Right? So that is the most perfect R I've ever done in my life. Just want someone take a picture of that. Brand and her consideration of the neoliberal moment. Good. But of course, just because we brought it up in relation to Brand specifically does not mean that the others are not political. In what way might some of the other pieces of literature that we've discussed?
Finley is anti-war.
Demoline.
How is Demoline political?
With the it's not like explicit, but the references to colonialism and our Canadian history.
Colonialism and arguably her critique of the imagination and the potential of the imagination is something that's quite political and also ties into Brand. So Finley's anti-war.
F just stands for Finley.
Yeah. We're missing a few.
Because all of them are political.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
of literature is political.
You said that yesterday. It's all political.
How is Tish political?
They're breaking barriers.
Yeah, like they're punk, like you said. And they're trying to
Like the man.
Yeah, fight the man.
Liberation.
Look, I when I said that, I used that term, and I was thinking about it afterwards. I was like, I actually don't know much about their individual politics, but right, like as a poetic movement, there is something rather political about it, right? In the sense of breaking these conventions, and if you'll recall, part of the Tish method of production, right, was just a newsletter that they were printing in a back room at the University of British Columbia, right? It was this super low budget thing that was literally student driven, right? It had no big publication house behind it that was able to distribute thousands of copies. It was literally the most manifesto-like quality that you could have as far as poetry production is concerned. Which even if we didn't bring them up directly yesterday, kind of ties into our discussion of what is the role of art in relation to the market, for example. A lot of these people and poets were not making it to make money. They were dirt poor, right? They were doing it for the sake of creating some kind of magic, right? Poetic magic as students. And there is something political about that.
Wasn't Tish like the way I took it?
Mhm.
That what they did was that they were trying to break the barrier because before that poetry was very like privileged like thing to do. So
Yeah.
they made it so that anybody could be published essentially and get their poetry out there regardless of whether they were highly educated or anything like that.
Yeah, the educated bit is, you can maybe push back against that in a sense, considering that they were
University.
they were university students, right? Of course, but yeah, the principle behind it is certainly that. Absolutely. Yeah, I asked about Tish specifically because they're perhaps the less obviously political, right? Although bowering with oil is certainly. Yeah, and of course, Angelique, we brought her up earlier with the slavery and references to current affairs and O.J. Simpson, and so on. We're missing one major theme that we've discussed more than once in class. Sometimes it comes up really explicitly, other times it's more subtle.
Like what is contemporary?
Sorry, two people spoke at the same time there, and my brain can't handle that.
Use of imagery, like people's imagery words.
Okay, that's just usually the use of imagery, we don't consider it a theme, right? More than,
It supports the themes.
yes, exactly. Right. At best, it would be a part of the form.
Just
Or
tell
not.
us.
Just,
Is it like dreams?
no, that defeats the purpose of the. I'm sorry.
That's what it was.
Dreams, yeah, dreams, yeah. Sorry, is that what you're going to say?
I was gonna say, what is contemporary? But yeah, let's do that.
That may or may not be a question that comes up with these.
Never mind.
Okay. So we obviously talked about it with Marrow Thieves. It's worth recapping that in the Marrow Thieves, are dreams entirely positive?
Yeah. Well, not
You're saying no, you're saying yes. Why do you say yes? And then I'll go over the top.
because dreams can mean hope, future, possibility, imagination, and people without it cannot imagine.
Okay. Good. So dreams are positive in the sense of what they can lead us towards or push us towards. And without them, it is rather devastating, right, on our imagination to cope with that threat. Why no?
Because some of the characters are plagued by nightmares.
Mm-hmm. All right, so there is the antithesis in nightmares. But you'll recall that we also brought up the question, I'm using the term now, I don't remember if I used it in relation to the Marrow Thieves specifically, but of negative dreaming as something different from nightmares. Do you remember the idea behind this was that the recruiters or the people behind the residential schools had a dream of going back to a time, right? That was their dream. Right? They wanted to recapture what they could do before. It's not a nightmare in that sense. They're technically living through a nightmare insofar as it's a post-apocalyptic world, but there is still a dream that drives their actions of going back. Right? And we were talking about that in the negative sense because their dream of going back, non-realizable as it may be, is a nightmare for someone else. Right? So the dreams become a rather double-edged sword in this context here. Yesterday we talked about dreams in inventory. How does she address hope and dreams?
Through movies.
Movies, right? Mass media, if you want to, because she refers to like movies, music, etc. She asked a very important question that related to this. Spent quite a bit of time on
It's
it.
the first sentence, wasn't it?
We believed in nothing. That could relate to it, absolutely. So their belief in nothing, and I'm just going to put inventory here. The radicality of, I wrote that down on the board yesterday and someone erased it. She was talking about Che at some point, and Kingston, Montevideo, dancing with Celia Cruz.
Having dreams of things that couldn't be because of the violence in the world.
The what if, right? The radicality of imagining what if. These things didn't happen, and they can never happen right now, but what if they did happen? There is something rather beautiful about thinking about that what if.
Could we say for dreams, like I'm thinking of one of Split Two,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily dreaming, but escaping, that kind of going that.
Mm-hmm. So sorry, you said what if and mass media. Yes, split tooth. ST is split tooth. Yeah, so escapism. There's another way in which dreams or dream-ish, right, dream-adjacent things appear in split tooth.
Disassociation.
Yeah, I would say so. That weird moment where she encounters this other being, you can probably make a pretty decent argument about its dreamlike qualities. Right? Because there's something not quite of this world. Right? Imagine what it's like actually. I know it's very difficult. I personally don't remember any of my dreams, but I know the feeling of a dream, right? Where something's not quite right. You're walking down a hallway, but your shoes are 2 inches thicker than they usually are, or something like that, right? A David Lynch movie is like a dream feels, right?
Like a hallucination.
Yeah, there is something rather hallucinatory about it. It's not necessarily negative, right? Or bizarre, like a David Lynch movie. It can be, yeah. I once showed Eraserhead to a class and they hated me for a long time. Anyway, but there is something kind of off kilter that you can recognize the individual components of it, just like you can in that scene in Split Tooth, and yet you also recognize that it's not quite of this world, right? Or it's not reality. That's also why traditionally a lot of people depicted or demonstrated dreams in a poetic fashion, right? Is because as a form, poetry was often, or as a medium, poetry was often associated with this kind of dissociation or ability to talk about things in a very imagistic way that we imagine dreams to be. It's a bit late to do this in class, but if you want a really good example, you can look at Coleridge. He has a poem, Kubla Khan. Right? This all about that. It's him trying to remember a dream that he had while on opium because he was an opium addict. And he gets right to the edge of it, and it's trippy and weird and insane, and then he can't quite remember it in the poem ends. Right? Yes?
It's kind of like Billy the Kid, too.
Yeah.
kind of like recollections that are like fuzzy, kind of spooky, uncanny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the difference with the kid, most of the recollections were kind of like retold and were said in different variations of other.
Right. So there is that further grounding in reality, I guess. But there are, I would agree with you, Moon, that there are certainly passages in Billy the Kid that edge into that unreality with the chicken that we were talking about, where somehow the chicken is
Gregory.
yeah, Gregory is being eaten as he's falling and all of that. Like the physics don't quite work out, right? There is that dreamlike quality to it. Yeah.
Like the Tall Tales or
Mhm.
like embellished stories.
Yes. Oh, I like that. Yeah, Tall Tales. It's good. I'm sorry, Brittany?
I said good job, Mark.
Yeah, good job. Okay. There are still other texts that deal with dreams and hope.
None of these.
Yeah, that's right there.
Good law.
I
Like,
think the worst does grow. Or no.
How would you argue that?
I had some of my notes from
I'm not saying you're wrong.
this,
Yeah. I'm not saying you're entirely wrong about the wars. There's probably a dream element to it, but think about how that would play out.
I wanted to say Angelique. And
Okay.
I don't know though. I just remember like when she was like almost delusional. Like this time will be different. And there's like unreal sort of sequences in it. Like,
I'll just write it down here. Right? The manifesto right at the start, this time is going to be different. Right? So that is as close to an assertion of hope that you can get. Right? The character specifically telling the audience, this is going to change everything. For me, for you, for whoever I'm imagining right now. Right? That's hope. Good. But there are also, some disjointed sequences where suddenly the present impinges on the future, on the past, right? Which again, in dream logic, makes sense, right? When suddenly one thing changes to another, from 1 second you're wearing a blue shirt, and the next you're wearing a pink shirt. No questions asked. Going from the 18th century to a news broadcast station. And it technically makes sense in the world that Lorena Gale established, even if it is disjointed in time. Right, so it does have that dreamlike quality to it. Good. Yes, Lee, you had your hand up.
Like, I feel like this is a stretch, but also like just going back from like the present, the past, like the memories.
Uh-huh. Obasan with the memories. The character of Obasan, yes, but as a text also.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Are the questions on the exam vague enough that, like, if you're asking a question about dreams or something, we can use any text?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's not going to ask about Obasan and I didn't read it?
Yes.
Okay.
I do when they're really broad questions, I sometimes give examples, right? Like, to pick up on your example of the dreams, right? I would say something like, this motif shows up in works like Obasan, the Marrow Thieves, blah, blah, blah. Consider it or give me an essay on like how that plays out in one of the works, right? But I'm not going to necessarily give you one to consider. So I think that's it. Am I missing anything? we
You tell us.
it's not really a theme per se, but it ties in with the element of form that we were talking about, and I'm just going to write. Write it down just so that we can remember, right? This whole element of various media coming together is something that, of course, many texts that we read, either self-consciously or sometimes unintentionally brought up. So I just wanted to include it here. What is always a good solution to studying for literature exams like this, right, where you don't necessarily have your text, is to go through these main themes, right? I obviously just gave you little Cliff Notes versions of them. Over the weekend, go over your notes, right? Go over, re-listen to some of the lectures if you want, right? That's what they're there for. You won't have time necessarily to listen to all of them unless you just do that, right, back to back, and then my voice is going to eventually drive you crazy. But there is, right. So take a theme and see where it takes you, right? I like the idea of politics and how it was demonstrated in Dimelide. Okay, let me see without my notes or without rereading if I can think of a few examples of how politics play out, or what the politics of the text are. And give yourself a repertoire, essentially, of these answers. I know I've been making kind of jokes about it here and there in class, but that's part of the reason why I'm able to like reference things here and there, like, oh, that reminds me of Coleridge's Kublai Khan. It's not just because I read a lot, right? That is true, but it's also because that's how I think about these things, right? When I had to write essays for my English classes or in preparation to anything like this, you do it by association, right? And you remember things through other pieces of media, other people around you, and it helps you build, right, your ideas outward through examples, even if they're not cited, right? But at least they're there in your mind. There's also nothing bad about, even if you have notes, once you've thought about these things, write it down, right? I know we are all like 21st century digital people, and that's great in some ways, but I cannot emphasize enough the value of just writing something down as a memory exercise. It genuinely does help, and the science backs me up on this. Right? Like handwriting, I mean, not just like typing. No shade against the people who are typing necessarily. I get it. I genuinely do, but right, there is something about memory of writing it down. Right? Yes, Emily.
It's kind of off topic, but do you think we'll have like our participation marks by the exams so we kind of know where we stand in the class, or is it kind of just
if you showed up to class at the very least, you're not failing, that's for sure. But yeah, I've been running a tab. I can put them up this weekend. Yeah. So usually how I do it with participation is like, if you show up, it's a pass, right? Like just show up without saying anything, you'll at least pass with a 60. Not great, but you're there, right? You know. And then the more you say things and participate and engage in the class, the higher your grade goes afterwards. Yeah. So you can probably estimate your grade based off of that.
Wait, what are wrong answers? If you're
No, I don't. No. There's a different. No. There's a difference between participating and being correct, right? I'm not looking for 100% strike rate on all the answers that you gave me. That would be an insanely no, that would just be awful.
I'm wrong.
Yeah. You all get no.
How about like spelling, grammar on this? How heavy are you?
Just because as long as he can read
I'm
it,
okay with that.
that's what he
Yeah.
said. But like,
Yeah.
Sometimes it gets a little bit
Yeah, no.
all over me when I'm writing back.
No, it's fine. Like again, that's part of the reason why I'm still giving you the entire class to write something that ostensibly you won't need the entire class for, is so you can reread yourself and avoid these mistakes. But no, if I can read it without any problem, that's fine. I was going to try to make a joke on this. I'm not someone who cares much about spelling conventions and grammar. Like, I try to respect them as much as possible, but I'm not going to like kick someone in the balls if they don't spell something properly. Yeah, I know some teachers who are like that, and I despise them.
How are you with cursive? Like I write like that. So yeah, I hope you can read my writing.
Give me a sample at the exam, and if I can.
you're gonna write your exam in cursive.
I usually it's hard probably because it's way faster for me. I have struggled just writing each individual letter.
Mhm.
I just flow.
Cursive is usually fine if it's a clear cursive. Yeah, like if it's a weird like
it's not a doctor.
No, exactly. Then that should be fine.
Give us the benefit of the doubt. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. One of the advantages of teaching at a college level, so much younger than not much younger, but younger than you all is no, just generally speaking, like on an average age. Anyway, one of the advantages of teaching at a college level is that they have awful handwriting, and it teaches you to really read super closely, and that's one of the reasons why I have glasses. But I'm just thinking here, did I forget anything? Talked about form, history, politics, dreams, hope. Okay.
If you did and you think about it later, just take it off.
I will. Yeah, I'll either take it off the exam or send you a random email on a Saturday. Like, no.
Make sure it's obvious it's from you, or we're all deleting.
Yeah, exactly. From Patrick in Contemporary Lit 100. Okay, I've gone over pretty much what I wanted to talk about. Any other specific questions about anything? We still have plenty of time, of course.
I'm gonna open this up to the
Yeah.
class. Why do you think I wrote this in my notes, guys?
Am I gonna want to leave for this? Or?
In the award, on my day of second award, I wrote, "Death is an afterthought," and then in quotation marks, I wrote, "Not yet," with an arrow saying hope/future possibility.
It's because
Why would I wrote that?
Robert One, he said that at the end. He said that at
That's
the
why I
end.
said
Or
Yeah, do you want to say that?
Yeah.
There's no more. Listen.
Me?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. At the end, after he was really badly burnt, injured, whatever, he was talking to the nurse, and she was going to mercy kill him, and he said, "Not yet." And then we did talk about why he said that because we weren't sure why.
That's like the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the dream.
He knows his death is like soon inevitable. Like he wanted to. There was some unfinished business.
Yeah, exactly. He wanted to hold on. It was never said explicitly, but yeah, some people had ideas that it was holding on for Juliet, right?
Yeah, that's underneath it.
Yeah. Right. He wasn't ready to let go. There's all kinds of ways that you can interpret that one. Any other questions?
Is there gonna be anything like regarding like the beginning, middle, and end? And I think like I have just one thing like in media res, Is that like where the story is starting from the actual like middle?
Well, yeah, it's when the story starts in the middle of an action.
Okay.
If you want a good example of in media res, when a movie starts with an explosion,
Oh, okay.
right? It just sets you like right there. The bomb has already gone off.
No build up.
No build up, just boom,
Okay.
let's go. There's no specific question about structure, right? The feeling of beginning, meeting, but looking at the questions here, there's probably a way in which you can incorporate that if you want to in some of those questions, but there's no specific question about that. Yeah. I'm surprised that we got in like a good 2 hours out of this. Actually, like that's I don't mind at all, obviously, but cool. Going once.
For my class party.
Going twice. No.
Party. I actually saw the Domino's guy when I pulled up, and I thought you were throwing us a party.
I was thinking of that. I'm like, oh, do I do something for the exam and something like that? But then I have to deal. Does anyone have allergies? I say that with zero promises, by the way. Like I have no idea if I'm gonna like do this. I'm just thinking on my feet here. No. You're gonna hold me accountable? No. I refuse to take accountability for any actions.
It's just food poisoning on the exam.
Yeah, the discount shrimp at the superstore or whatever.
Had to sit down all day.
Take your shrimp and take your
What's your thoughts on like dancing for the whole hour for the exam to get it?
What?
Get it.
No.
Yeah.
No, I cannot do that. Do the creative redoing of a dance number.
Like,
The
What if
war-
we did it all as a class?
Yeah, The Wars the musical. You all get 100%.
What if we just do a skit, like act it out?
Yeah. I like it.
I'm a horse.
My only issue with things like this is that again, like, and this is perhaps my bad. I would have given you more time to prepare if you wanted to do like a class activity for something like that. But giving you a weekend to do that is would be madness, and it would almost be more work than just thinking about the works that we've talked about in this class.
I don't know, Billy the Kid, we could put that on.
Yeah, it actually was turned into a musical. Yeah, try to find an online version of the script. I smudged my glasses. Yeah, sorry.
We have a theater over there.
Do you really? Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Yeah,
Of course we do.
I just never saw it. Okay. Even if you don't have questions right now, do not hesitate. I'm available all day tomorrow. I have no meetings, no anything. Probably Saturday, Sunday, I'll be correcting your final essays. You can maybe use your essays actually to think about some of these topics, right? That's totally fine as well. And yep, don't hesitate. I'll try to arrive early on. And when I say early, I mean after lunch sometime. I'll arrive on Monday. So if you want to drop in, send me a message, and I'll probably make sure to be in my office instead of in the library. So all of that should be fine. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good one.